Welcome to Unlearning Ignorance, a podcast where once a month we discuss a commonly divisive issue and attempt to fairly represent multiple perspectives. We are not experts, nor are we neutral. Our goal is to show an accurate understanding of conflicting sides, in hopes that it will foster civil conversations with an attitude of always learning. But we also want the show to represent you. So every month we will have a response episode where we highlight your comments, emails, tweets, and voicemails, telling us what we got terribly right, incredibly wrong, or something in between. Thanks for listening to this month's episode, where we bring together Vox Populi, the voice of the people. We haven't seen each other in a while.
I know.
We've been talking, but haven't seen each other face to face in a while.
For listeners who don't know, I mean, aside from the fact that we're in different states, we do this over Skype, is that we've actually been planning this podcast for a while. And so the first 4 months of main episodes are already in the bag. And we recorded them in the order that we plan on releasing them. So not only have we not seen each other in a few months, just from circumstances in life, and you got a wife and a dog and all that, but this Pacifism episode that we released a few weeks ago, it's a little old.
Yeah, 2 years, I believe.
No,
I think
year and a half. Year and a half.
We
recorded it in November 2018.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Which is crazy.
Year and a half. That's... Oof.
Right, and there's a decent amount of legitimate reasons why we didn't start releasing episodes as soon as we thought we would. Between everything that you just listed, and I recorded an album, and both of us work jobs that often keep us working like overtime unexpectedly.
You've actually recorded like 3 albums. You do that album a day, right?
Well, if you include those unofficial albums that usually I don't share with people, then that you could say like I've recorded like 5 albums in the time. But then there's the one that's actually on Spotify and iTunes and the like. So we're in this now, releasing episodes every month.
Mm-hmm.
Something along the lines of a main topic on the first Monday of a month, and probably aiming for this response episode on the last Monday of every month. So what were your thoughts going into this episode and kind of hearing it again, having been so far removed from it?
Man, I come off terribly. That was my initial thought. One, it's hard to listen to my voice back, and I found a tolerable way to do it, as to put it at 1 7/4 speed. 7
you were listening to it at hyperspeed?
Yeah, like
I used to do that.
Not quite 2 times, but
yeah,
that made it more tolerable. But second is 5 minutes into the episode of this podcast where I declared I want to learn things I don't know about. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. Your ideas are so crazy. I can't even abide so pompously. And that was just so frustrating and cringe.
Yeah.
But throughout the episode, because you immediately called me out on it, and it's beautiful.
I did do that.
I did not humbly accept your call out. And retract.
There's a very honest irony to that, in the sense that we are inviting people into something that's difficult. Mm-hmm. This whole idea of unlearning ignorance, to truly humble yourself to understanding the viewpoints of people that you voraciously disagree with, is not an easy thing. And so there might be some topics that, that you and I aren't particularly passionate about, or that you as a listener aren't particularly passionate about. But for all of these, we're picking specifically hot button divisive issues with strong dividing lines between people. And to get yourself to think about and consider the thoughts and positions on the opposite side of that can be difficult. And so I think it was honest and actually kind of cool to see it in you as the host and creator of this podcast, to say, this is hard for me too, and we have a viewpoint here that just makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And that's it's just what we're trying to create in each other and in our listeners, is that,
absolutely,
I need to understand this better.
It's totally a journey too, of me going from like a guy who says he wants to do this to like actually doing it kind of at the end of the episode where I'm like, hey, this is what I admire about these people and these ideas. And that journey like kind of made it up for me and made me cringe less at the end. So
Yeah.
I'm here to eat crow and admit like I really came off terribly at the beginning, and but I ended up liking how we finished the episode, and that beautiful thing of us talking about how these people with different perspective can be friends. I can't remember if we planned that or if you made that up on a like if that was a question we made up right then.
Yeah,
But
it's more so it started popping up into early conversations, and then in future episodes becomes like the main segment that we end on.
yeah,
Because I'm actually in editing these episodes, I'm pretty pleased with how we fell into a groove that I think is going to work well long term. Of us looking at a divisive issue from a micro lens, with one of us arguing pro, one of us arguing con, us switching to looking at the same issue from a macro lens, where we also switch hats and the opposites people, the opposite hosts,
hmm,
argue pro and con, and then ending with a conversation about how people who disagree the most on this issue can still get along. Um, that's really the format that not only the next few episodes have, but that I think is going to be really healthy moving forward.
yeah. And when I switched to the macro, like I was totally remiss by not mentioning famous pacifist and successful pacifist movement like Gandhi's Salt March that really rebelled against the oppressive British rule at the time, and uh, led to the freedom of a lot of Indians, and uh, eventually total freedom of India, but also the most successful American pacifist movement led by MLK, the civil rights and the the huge laws that got passed and freedoms that got reinforced like not that long ago. And those are like huge highlights for the macro view of pacifism that I just totally whiffed on.
Sure.
Not missing
Yeah,
on not getting, yeah.
and one of those things is, and one of the reasons why we do these response episodes is because we're not going to cover everything, and we're not going to cover everything perfectly. So if you're confused at this point as to what these response episodes are, it's not us responding to our episodes. It's us sharing how you responded to our episodes.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of having this conversation. We decided to have our own kind of response to it because it's our first episode and because it was recorded a while back.
Yeah.
But we'll be transitioning soon into your responses as listeners who
Yeah.
wrote in to share or had conversations with us about the things we had to say about pacifism. So thanks again for writing in, for listening
Mhm.
to the show. I almost wonder whether there might be cases in the future where our response episodes also cover old episodes. Like maybe in 4 months, we'll have someone write in about the pacifism episode and have some really vital things to say, and we'll need to pinpoint it then. But the focus will be the response episode for that month's topic, which right now all we have to discuss is the one episode, pacifism. But yeah, just to wrap up my thoughts on it, I'm generally pleased not only with the delivery of it, but just with how we actually like studied and researched for the episode.
Mhm.
As we say in the intro to the show, we're not experts on these topics, but we do really try to put in the work to represent different sides well and to know what we're talking about. So it was cool to listen back and hear things that I wouldn't say right now that were fresh on my mind because I was deep in studying the topic. But one of the funny things for me about that first episode was getting to share that anecdote at the top of the episode, about how even when you're against violence, even when you are trying to avoid dealing out violence or acting out in any sort of harmful ways, that violence is still just something that happens in the world that you can't avoid. And for me, it was opening a can of food, a can of peas specifically, that caused this violence against me that I actually had to go to the hospital and get glued up to fix. And I have a scar now to remind me of the violence that I accidentally committed against myself.
What? I didn't know you had.
Yeah.
I didn't know it left a scar.
Yeah, never forget. So
hashtag never forget the violent peas.
So we actually have a listener who, in our Unlearning Ignorance Facebook group, which if you're listening to this and you're not in the group, please come join. It's where a lot of these discussions are going to happen. He shared in correspondence with that anecdote about opening the can of peas, a famous little sketch from the show The Simpsons, where this army general, cigar in hand, asks, "Tell me, young man, what do you want out of life?" And Homer, reaching across a dinner table, says, "I want peas." So the general says, "We all want peace. So what's the best way to get peace?" And Homer responds, "With a knife." Which is not only a hilarious joke about using violence to make peace, but it's also him balancing a few peas on his knife, which is ridiculous because that's absolutely the worst way to get peas. Use a spoon, maybe a fork, definitely not a knife. And the joke there is that a knife is actually the worst way to get peas, and so maybe it's actually the worst way to get peace as well. So it's a really tasteful and humorous joke that's probably better seen than heard, but it's funny looking back that we definitely did not take advantage of the opportunity that we had to make more peas puns in the episode.
Yes.
That we talked about being peaceable when we could have talked about being peaceable. So real wasted opportunity that I wanted to point out here.
Those unpeasable peas.
Seriously. Those violent peas. Those are not sweet peas. Those unsweet peas. I think we did make that joke in the episode, so maybe I'm just being redundant at this point.
So hashtag real-time response here.
Sure.
I sent out, I have some friends that we've been talking about the episode with, and one of them finally got back to me with his full thoughts. And I'm just going to read his text. I'm not going to name him, but I'm just going to read his text verbatim right here. And he says, "From a Christian worldview, if I know that I'm going to be with Jesus for eternity, but this guy trying to murder me probably isn't, why would I shoot him to defend myself and seal his fate by damning him to hell?" See Jim Elliott, Nate Saint. You can also make arguments for pacifism from worldviews that value harmony, honor, and the collective more than individual stoicism, karma, and reincarnation. So that was just some, like, a guy, one of my friends just texted me while we were recording, and nice. I thought that was fun to just do that real time response there.
Coming in under the gun. And another, before we get a bit more serious with the pacifism feedback, I have to share just more joke feedback, which was also just text messages from friends. So a friend writes in saying, "Me, finally sitting down to listen to Unlearning Ignorance because I'm a good friend and I know things about your life. Then getting 3 minutes in, Chase has a girlfriend?"
Stabbed in the heart.
Yeah. And so I respond with a screenshot of a conversation I'd had earlier that day with my dad, with the exact same conversation where my dad texts me in all caps, "What girlfriend?" So, benefits of releasing an episode that was recorded a year and a half ago. No big deal.
We really wanted to make these timeless. Yeah. And so definitely talking about our girlfriends that we're definitely going to end up with really made it timeless.
Yeah, it's the best thing that we could have done. Hands down. So do you want to go into some of the responses we had on Twitter?
Yeah, sure.
At unignorancepod.
Pat responded to us on Twitter. He was reminded of when I was talking about the cartoonish, cowardly pacifists, talking about Upham from Saving Private Ryan. There's a scene where he just allows all his brothers in arms to be killed as he just cowers and cries in the stairwell, and that is a great visual image of the people that we don't want to promote. If we're being civil, we're like, we don't want to go to this image of these are pacifists. These are all the pacifists. Don't want to paint with that broad of a brush. to basically dismiss their ideas
Yeah.
because there are cowards who hold them.
Right. To conflate nonviolence with non-acting.
Yeah, it's insincere and not helpful. Just not helpful for a productive conversation.
Yeah.
But then he goes into the macro view of the government government pacifism, which he pointed to Switzerland, which is interesting because they do arm all of their citizens, but they choose to remain neutral in basically every war.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's familiar with Switzerland's military, but the citizenry is their military. They go through some kind of basic training, I think it's either in high school or after high school, and they're giving a state issue rifle that they keep in their house. But their government policy has been to not enter any wars and purely to defend their country if invaded.
Yeah.
Which goes back to our kind of just war back and forth. Where is it pacifism? Is it just war theory? And so I think we concluded that Switzerland would fall into the just war. If you're going to call them pacifist,
Right.
very just war pacifist.
Yeah, and I think something else that we got into on the episode, which is going to be true for a lot of topics, is that real people with real views will rather land somewhere on a large spectrum or grid of perspectives rather than just one side or the other. It's very rarely going to be that black and white or binary on an issue. So just war is almost centered on the grid between being like a pacifist or not, like pro-war or anti-war, but maybe just slightly on the side of pacifism. So
I would say it's well into pacifism, but it's if I can see where you would say it's more towards the middle.
Yeah.
Because I think of being in the middle is taking action to prevent violence, more being in the middle and falling on it's like the dichotomy of just war. It's like taking a few measures, minimal violence measures to prevent possible future action, and then the next step is obviously like violence is justified if any threat is issued towards us.
Yeah. And we had a comment from a police officer, actually, who he didn't say much, but basically said like he was glad that we got into what seems to be the real like pivot point of the conversation for pacifism, which is in trying not to ever commit violence, what's being done to help people or stop violence, which really is a key thing here. And that goes into the just war thing, that, there's sound logic behind the idea of only fighting in defense. But, having, on a government-wide level, having a military so that you can defend yourself. Which, I don't know if this had to do with Pat's tweets or not, but we were going to get into it's a quick discussion about militaries that don't have, countries that don't have militaries.
I mean, another listener mentioned, which lined up well with Pat's mention of Switzerland, is that there are like 24 or so countries that just don't have militaries. Costa Rica was mentioned, Iceland.
Yeah, Haiti,
they just don't have
Marshall Islands.
Yeah. They just don't have militaries at all. But it's very notable that all of these have like some very key characteristics, that they're very tiny, they have strong police forces, or have deals with other countries that for the other countries to essentially protect them with their militaries.
Yeah, a lot of the smallest countries in the world are the ones that don't have militaries. and those are countries that are the least likely to be invaded or for any army to have a real reason to invade. Meanwhile, some of them, for example, would be, as you just said, countries that are covered by the military forces of other countries, such as countries that are now independent but used to be U.S. territories. So they were able to receive their independence, but the U.S. military is still there, kind of functioning as a military.
Yeah. I mean, Japan comes to mind. Like, I think it's a lot of the restrictions have been lifted now that they're allowed to have their own military. But for decades, Japan was not allowed their own military. And that's the hole that America filled.
Mm-hmm. I think the idea of demilitarization is a compelling one. But what we see in most of these situations is that without a military, you still have something, or in most cases need something. Like you said, there will be a police force there, almost without exception.
Well, to enforce, and I know a lot of, I mean, I myself think police force, oh, they're there to enforce laws to the people internally. And that's totally different from external force. But when you're entered by foreign nationals or people that aren't from your country, that's you enforcing your laws on people outside of your country, even though they're physically in your country, which is what militaries do.
Right. Well, and this idea of demilitarization actually brings us into what I think might be our last point of feedback for this episode, from a listener named Day, who wrote in to say, "Your podcast made me reevaluate my position in regards to personal pacifism. Before, I would have considered myself more of an absolute pacifist, but I'm realizing that I fall more into a conditional pacifist category. That is to say, I'm against any unnecessary harm, but I agree that sometimes force is the best to reduce more potential harm. On a governmental or international level, I agree that pacifism is indeed idealistic, but warfare does conflict with my conditional view because oftentimes the people we try to help are on the receiving end of harm from us as well, whether it be sociopolitical turmoil or direct harm via physical force or violence. The solution I have: can we adopt a mindset of anti-militarism? I hate the state in which other countries are often left once a military encounter has ensued there. In my opinion, anti-militarism is a better term to define my position because I support helping allies, but I believe that we usually see our military only as agents of justice and liberation, or only as aggressors. I think it's both. So with anti-militarism, the focus is taken off whether force is used or not, but how impactful our occupation and tactics are on the populations we are trying to assist. The more I write, the more realizations I come upon. One such realization is that I, and probably most people, mostly associated pacifism with reducing harm, but not maximizing beneficent action. Your podcast has helped me realize that my ideal position of pacifism would be to focus on the latter, of maximizing help." So that was incredible to read, honestly.
I mean, that absolutely warmed my heart, and it is the first time I'm hearing that because Chase saved that for the episode because he knew that would make my heart flutter, and
basically,
like that is I love that response. It's exactly what I'm wanting this podcast to do is like reconsider. You don't have to change your views, just reconsider and either reinforce or move or relabel your views.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to change it, just let's use language to I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
It's
if you are actually right about a topic, then you are in zero danger of threatening your position by learning more about the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually just reinforce your position by learning more about the other side and being more foundational and factual in why you see them to be wrong. So honestly, like that's kind of the power of learning, is that you can only get more right if you're learning true things. And to just quote a philosopher, you know, most of us are trying to be progressive. I know progressive has a specific meaning in American politics, sure,
Mm-hmm.
but most of us are trying to progress society in good, helpful, moral ways, however you want to spin that. And just this philosopher's quote was, if you're going in the wrong direction, the most progressive thing you can do is to turn around and go the other way. And so, yeah, and this is great. Like, we not only do we love hearing that from our listeners, this is what we want for ourselves as well. We're not coming here as the bearers of correctness and the ones who know right and wrong. We're also just wanting to personally go on these journeys to learn more about topics, to be able to argue from different perspectives and different sides, and to do it well and thoughtfully. Not so like starting with ourselves of unlearning our ignorance and then passing it along to you with the episodes we release.
Yeah, and then unlearning our own ignorance more from our audience interaction.
Exactly, right.
I love
Yeah,
it.
even admitting that our research won't be thorough or perfect. We might fall into some bad sources sometimes, or misunderstand things, or misrepresent things. So we're so happy that we got to spend this time responding to your feedback, to our listeners, and we can't wait to release the next episode, which will be on personality tests, as we plan on kind of flip-flopping every month between a political leaning issue and a social leaning issue.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Well, anything else you want to say on this response episode?
Thanks to everybody who listened and responded, and your support has been awesome, and we're excited to take this journey of unlearning ignorance.
Absolutely. And by your involvement with us, you can help this podcast represent the voice of the people, the Vox Populi.